Hi everyone, how are we all doing? Good evening for those in Nigeria, and hi to everyone. It's good to see our lovely faces. My name is Juliana Imam, and I'll be your anchor for today. You're welcome to Intellectual Property Mentorship and Internship Program organized by Gypsy. I'll just say some of the things that we should try to do. Number one, please try to put your names in because of the marking of attendance. So if the name that you have is not something that I can relate with, then I might not be able to mark you present. Also, there is the private mentorship program that is available for anyone who might need to speak to some of the mentors privately. So if there's any mentor, both from past and present, that you think that you'd like to talk to for 30 minutes, you can take advantage of this private mentorship by using this link, bit.ly/JIIPCC You can use that. We are streaming live. So it's exciting to see everyone, knowing that this is the first week, and I hope that we'll be able to learn a lot from this. Please feel free to engage with the mentors, take pictures, post about what you learned afterwards, and tag the mentors so that they can know that what they spoke about was valuable to you. I'll just go ahead to read out what we are about. Gypsy, oh, sorry, I'm clicking on a different one. Just want to get the one for IP. Please hold on. I hope it's this one. Okay, Gypsy Intellectual Property Mentorship and Internship Program is a quarterly program for students, young professionals, and enthusiasts across Africa. Mentees are afforded the opportunity to access valuable advice, training, network, mentorship, internship, discussion forums, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced mentors. This program seeks to encourage continuous training, development, and evolution in Africa and around the world. You can watch our videos by searching for Gypsy on YouTube and Facebook. Our hashtag is GypsyMIP. Our objectives are to provide easy access to quality professional guidance, training, and resource materials for students, young professionals, and enthusiasts in Africa to facilitate dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced practitioners and stakeholders to transform mentees into mentors and leaders for the next generation of mentees and to facilitate further mentorship, internship, and scholarships and job placements for mentees. So we'll go ahead straight and we'll be hearing presentations. We would be listening to presentations from the groups. So there are 4 groups, and for each group you have 7 minutes to present. I'm sure you already know who is presenting and you know who will be sharing the slides. So let's just go on. So if the person to share the slides is delaying, you can just start presenting while they try to share. So thank you very much. Let's hear from group 1. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of our mentors here. Thank you, I see you. You'll be getting to talk very soon. Thank you. So who is presenting for group 1? I think that's Anthony. Do we have the person presenting for group 1 here? Okay, I think he's just logging in. So if group 2 is here, group 2 can start the presentation while we wait for Anthony.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. I hope you can all hear me. Good evening.
Sorry. Group 2?
Yeah, for group 2.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Adedron David, and I will be presenting for group 2 on our presentation, the impact and importance of intellectual property on the African economy. So now okay, I don't know if the person that's sharing the slide is here. Is the slide being shared? I'll go on. I would go on while we wait for the person to share the slide. According to WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, intellectual property refers to the creations of inventions, literary and artistic works, design and symbols, names and images used in commerce. So the main objective of intellectual property protection is to encourage creative, innovative, and innovative activities. Now, the intellectual property opportunities are open to developing countries. They give protection to intellectual property in this, giving protection to intellectual property in the society has encouraged innovations and creations among citizens and even encouraged them to participate more actively in international trade. The Nigerian economy is one of our main focus in my presentation as a focus for Africa at large. So the Nigerian economy is one of the largest in Africa with a GDP of $432.3 billion, according to a survey done by World Bank in December 2020. In 2020, the motion picture and music recording industry contributed an estimated $1.8 billion to the country's GDP. These figures were contributed by the creations only 2 out of 6 works protected by the Copyright Act, which is only a fraction of what comprises intellectual property. This was gotten from Trading Economies and International Trade Administration. Yeah, so various legislations that regulate intellectual property in Nigeria, most notably the Patents and Designs Act, the Copyright Act, and the Trademarks Act, ensure the protection of patents, copyright works, and trademarks respectively. Now, poor implementation of these legislations, however, result in numerous infringements which prevent creators of these works from benefiting exhaustively from their creations. This has resulted in many investors, especially foreign investors, being reluctant to invest in Nigeria's intellectual property space, thus reducing the revenue it would ordinarily contribute to Nigeria's economy. The lacuna created by the failure of Nigeria's legislative organs to enact a statute to ensure the protection of trade secrets has resulted in owners of trade secrets having to take extra measures to ensure the protection of their trade secrets. Did I say in 2020 also the I think I've mentioned that. Now, for a country where numerous violations are perpetrated against the rights of the grantees of intellectual property with adequate statutory protection, the amount of infringement on trade secrets is unimaginable. It is pertinent that intellectual property works are well protected to ensure that creatives gain maximum profit from their creations, and intellectual property can contribute substantially and exhaustively to not only the Nigerian economy, to the economy of countries in Africa at large. So, in summary, one of the impacts and importance of intellectual property in Africa is one, that two joint ventures, co-production agreements, joint research, technology tie-ups, and licensing arrangements, intellectual property rights protection are bringing together major firms in African countries. 2, the technological development of industrialized countries and some of the industrializing developing countries has evolved with the existence and enforcement of intellectual property rights protection. And lastly, intellectual property protection provides a boost to national wealth and its contribution to sustainable development. to sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for the presentation. But I would like to hear in 1 minute what you think about what you said, because you just read everything out.
Okay. Yes. So I believe that since we've established the fact that the goal of or the objective of intellectual property is so as to serve as a means of protecting the works of creatives, their ideas, their artistic work, and everything. Now, it has helped since these works are being protected. Now, there's no room for forgery or all these what we call it illegal trade of these works. Now, let's say, for example, for movies, now people have to purchase these movies legally through the right means. They can't. All these dubs are not allowed; they are illegal because of the advent of intellectual property, and the.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I wanted to just hear your voice aside to what you were reading. Thank you. Okay, so let's hear from group 1. Thank you very much, David. So who is presenting for group 1? Okay, I guess he's not. Okay, he's here, but I think. Okay, you can go ahead. You have 7 minutes. But your line is breaking. Your line is breaking. Maybe you log out and then log back in, or you ask someone else in your group to present, or you can try changing your network. Okay, so while we wait for him to sort his network out, can we hear from group 3? So Anthony, please just try to sort your network out and then you can present. Okay, so who is presenting for group 3? Who is presenting for group 3, please? Unye Kachuku. If he or she is not around, someone else in the group can present. So who is presenting for group 3?
Can you hear me, Mike? Can I go on?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So I'm asking, like, do you have the files? Like, are we to share the files? Because we have some issues with those who share the file. The screen,
well,
I mean.
You can start your presentation. I'll just look for it. But please let this not repeat itself. Let every group take care of its sharing and presentation.
Right, we can't do that, but we have the person that's supposed to do that had an emergency.
No problem.
Right,
you
so
can continue.
the topic was the topic was the impact of intellectual property in the African economy. Right, so we started the topic by understanding that intellectual property is not just like a new thing, because it has a lot of implications, a lot of application in different sectors in the globalized world, in different continents, and most continents have tapped into the concept of intellectual property. But the African space has tried to do that, but it's still riddled with issues. Right. So we by highlighting the problems of African, and that's in the discussions we have before coming up with the write-up. We began by laying a background about intellectual property and the relevance of intellectual property in different spheres, where you have intellectual property being categorized under intangible properties of business, because in a company, in any organization, in any entity, they have the physical assets and the intangible assets. The physical asset talks about your working capital, your machineries, your plants and vehicles, while your intangible properties talk about your goodwill, your brand image, as well as intellectual property. So we talked about IP can be defined as the creations of human mind for any legal entity. It can also be categorized under intangible assets, as earlier mentioned. And we also saw the definition of the World Intellectual Property Organization. We defined intellectual property as inventions, as well as literary and artistic works with other examples. So after then, we also went ahead to talk about laid more foundation on the background of intellectual property in economy nations and other economies of other nations. So we found out that intellectual property also has different, the first bullet points where that it forms the bulk of the value of the company. So we had other relevance of intellectual property, which also talks about that its intellectual property also leads to the improvement of most companies has also appraised the importance of intellectual property, being that they improve the IP audit, the IP management. They try to boost their portfolio because most brands have shifted, are giving more concern to their intangible asset, because the intangible asset can go a long way to revenue for the brand or a company or any outlet, because the physical properties of softwares and tiers, as well as other to diminish the value of the physical property. So this goes on and on to explain the relevance of intellectual property brand. So by also talking about the importance of intellectual property in the global markets. Now, intellectual property most times is a very valuable type of intellectual property in the sense that you can milk it over and over and again. You have your patents. Most people having patents, milking the invention. They don't have to work a long time or invent again. They can just license in technology. Others can license in technology, as well as they can get revenue from their patents. So intellectual property also helps encourage innovation in any economy, because the more the intellectual properties produce and the more the protection and everything given to the intellectual property assets, they go able to encourage invention and technology, because most technology brands look for the ecosphere that helps to protect the intellectual property. So we continue by saying that this just goes on and on to explain, the importance of intellectual property rights, as well as a bullet point here is that intellectual property helps to, it affects international trade flows. Yes, you talk about international trade, you find out that when trade as an exporter taking a product out in another ecosphere, you have to also look at your intellectual property concerns. Now, in the international market, you find out that most people encourage you to do your freedom to operate analysis, where you have to take about if you're infringing on the IP of another, or if you can able to operate in an international market. So you have to also, this just explains the relevance of and the impact of IP in various sectors, and what we actually in the next slides coming up from this is basically the intellectual property in Africa. So we actually see that Africa Africa is not just sleeping though, but we also have a lot of work to do, because we're confronted with a lot of challenges like weak laws, not really weak laws, because most of the laws are actually provided, but the enforcement becomes an issue, because you feel that they have different acts like the Trademark Act, Patents and Designs Act, Copyright Act, but enforcement becomes an issue, where you have CMOs who ought to collect the royalties of other companies, not really enforcing them, as well as confronted with issues like piracy, and with the advent of digitalized mediums of streaming and other use cases of intellectual property, find that it's hard to track the utilization of these resources. So we found out that This is just all about the importance of intellectual property. But I'll go on with for the sake of time, I'll go on to the main body of everything we're talking about. So, in the last slide, we also talk about the key innovation because we highlighted the challenges. Yes, these are the challenges. There are plethora of challenges that has hindered the growth of intellectual property in Africa, the cardinal of which is insufficient laws. Yes, insufficient laws are there because you find out that there are a lot of trends in the IP space where you have NFTs, non-fungible tokens, you have other kind of things springing up in emerging technologies. And you find out that, for example, jokes under the Copyright Act are not mentioned or are things copyrightable, but you can actually categorize jokes as copyright. So to be protected under copyright, I mean. But with the weak, I won't say weak laws, but the less scope of these laws in terms of coverage. Most of these laws doesn't cover a lot of aspects. So this gives a lot of lacuna and gaps in the enforcement of these laws. So associated with these weak laws is also, like I could say, the bad eggs, like the corruption that happens, as well as piracy and all. So I can also add to this as the weak enforcement. So their laws, they are wise, innovative people bringing up development in terms of legal framework, but enforcement becomes an issue. So this has also, if you read a lot of statistics, you find out that people do movies, you can't make money from your movies because some guys in Aba and other places are pirating your movies. And you find out, okay, there are laws, yes, there are laws, but how is the enforcement of these laws? So you also have things like corruption, bribery, and other things, affecting the system in terms of making sure that they work. Now, in our recommendation, we talk about conventions. Now, yes, if you study things like other conventions like the Berne Convention, which Nigeria is a party to, the Paris Convention, the Madrid System for Enforcement of Trademarks, you find out that you hardly, or you find few African countries who are party to those conventions. Now, one way of protecting your work is either national protection, regional protection, or international framework. So you find out that most times, if the national protection doesn't work, you can actually opt for the regional. That's if Africa has its own IP policy, or if you go for the international framework. Now, most companies, countries, are leveraging on the international frameworks of protecting of intellectual property. But you find out that few African countries are parties or signatories to this. So this actually affects the enforcement of these laws. For instance, if I want to contract or do a business in Beijing, for instance, now, and I found out that, okay, instead of going to the Beijing trademark office to trademark my goods, I could actually opt for the international framework where I just by being a party to that framework, I can be able to just have sufficient protection without going to pay fees to register them in the domestic country of that nation I'm about to operate. So those kind of issues also spring up whether African are not party to those conventions. You get so a lot of challenges are actually confronting the African continent, and we actually made key recommendations in the sense that we suggest that there have to be a lot of laws and enforcement. And if I should suggest, I will also talk about equipping. Can I come like equipping those? We've gone like equipping those who are those like judges on the issues of IP, because most times judges are not actually skilled in these IP things. So when you have disputes coming into the courtroom, you have weak reasoning around the dispute. So that's why most of them go for ADR. But find out that ADR is actually, although mediation is a bit cost friendly, but in terms of arbitration, it's actually not really, most people can't just afford arbitration cases, for example, SMEs. So most times they actually go for litigation, but when you have judges who are not conversant with the IP framework or will not understand the dynamics of intellectual property, that big resolution actually springs up. So laws actually are confronting the African continent, but we suggest that there needs to be a revamp of our laws, if possible, exposition on the framework, expanding the framework of the scope of the study, include emerging technologies and emerging dynamics in the IT space, as well as doing suggesting or giving much more weight to enforcement, because you might have 10,000 laws, but weak enforcement can make them so that's basically what we're talking about. You just highlighted challenges as well as challenges and resolutions in giving the resolutions.
Thank you, Anthony.
So that's our work.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I think I was able to hear most of your presentation. Just towards the end, the network was a bit bad, but I got your presentation. Thank you very much for talking about the impact and importance of IP on the economy. So let's hear from Group 3 and Group 4. Group 3. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm here for Group 3. Okay, we're talking about the impact. Please, can everyone hear me? I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm talking about the impact and importance of intellectual property on the African economy. So under this, we'll be conceptualizing IP, types of IP. We'll be considering the IP and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, AfTA. We'll consider IP development in Africa, the essence of AfTA, and then we'll consider the impact of IP on the African economy. Now, the African economy has been impacted by diverse industries and factors, including intellectual property, which is the sole purpose of this presentation. As a concept that is widely known, it has generated income and job opportunities to people. It's important to know that IP has made impact and its own contributions on the African economy. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images that are used for commercial purposes. The main importance of intellectual property law is to enable people to earn recognition and or financial benefits from what they invent or create. It also encourages people to become more creative because they are sure that they are compensated for their creative efforts. Now, intellectual property under the types of IP is divided into several types, including copyright and related rights, which refers to rights of creators that creators have over their literary and artistic works. We have patents, which refers to exclusive rights that are granted over an invention. We have trademarks, which refers to signs that are capable of distinguishing the goods and services of one enterprise from another enterprise. We have industrial designs, which refers to ornamental or aesthetic aspects of an article. We also have geographical indications, which refers to signs used in goods that have a specific geographical origin. So it distinguishes them because of their geographical origin, and they possess qualities or reputation or characteristics that are essentially attributable to that place of origin. We also have trade secrets, which refers to IP rights on confidential information, which may be sold or licensed. We also have plant variation, which refers to the genetic diversity of a single plant species in the world. So due to the various types of intellectual property, different people can create sources of income for themselves, thereby increasing the value that they place on intellectual property. And when they create sources of income for themselves, they can also create income for the nations that they dwell in. Now we'll consider the IP and the AFCFTA. Before the invent of the AFCFTA, we have had African organizations that regulated IP. We have the IPO and we have the ARIPO. The IPO stands for the African Intellectual Property Organization, while the ARIPO stands for the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. Now, the IPO is the IP organization for about 17 French African states that enables a uniform application for IP rights, including trademark, patents, and industrial designs. So with the invent of the IPO member states, which includes French African states, they don't have to make different applications in their different countries to be able to protect their IP rights. They can make a uniform application to the IPO. And once it is approved, that IP right is valid in the other 16 member states, that's aside the state that brought the application. While the ARIPO, which is the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, this came into force about 1986. It also comprises of different African member states, about 19 of them, but Nigeria is not one of them. And Nigeria is also not one of the IPO member states because it's not a French-speaking African state. So ARIPO is similar to the IPO. It's also a regional IP organization responsible for creating a uniform platform for application for IP rights. Unlike the IPO, in the IPO application, when someone in a member state makes an application, they have the 6 months objection timing, where if another member state has an objection to that IP application, they can place the objection. But just like the IPO, once it is approved, that IP right is protected in the other 18 states. The purpose of these organizations are basically to promote a common system of IP protection characterized by uniform legislation. Now, the AFCFTA, which is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, came into force, was fully implemented January 2021, so it's barely a year old. It's created the largest free trade area in the world, bringing together about 55 African Union countries. The aim of the AFCFTA is to bring a common market for products and services, a regional customs authority, a competitive African economy, and promote industrial development. The AFCFTA is set out to establish a clear, transparent, and mutually advantageous rule to govern trade, even the trade of intellectual property, among state parties. Fortunately for us, Nigeria is a signatory to the AFCFTA. In the preamble of the AFCFTA, one of the general objectives is to create a continental free trade area that boosts intra-African trade, and they are conscious of the need to create an expanded and secure market for goods and services of the state parties. In Article 3, Paragraph H of the AFCFTA agreement, it is stated that the agreement is there to resolve the challenges of multiple and overlapping memberships and expedite the regional and continental integration process. So the essence of the AFCFTA is to integrate a continental platform where all the African parties are signatory to it, so one law will bind everybody. In Article 4, the agreement states that parties shall cooperate on investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. And the AFCFTA goes on to provide for a protocol in settlement of disputes, even regarding intellectual property. It's commendable that the AFCFTA recognizes intellectual property because everything is IP. Now we talk about the IP development in Africa, the essence of the AFCFTA. Integration of IP systems, bridging the territoriality limitation. Now, in the course of study of IP, you know that IP rights are territorial in nature. So a nation can only protect the IP rights of that nation. So with the invent of the AFCFTA, with the purpose that it is there to achieve, because we cannot exactly see it being implemented now, but in the long run, we're sure that it has many potential that's going to change the trade market. So with a unified law, we are able to bridge the territoriality limitation, bringing about national treatment so that in every state, even if my IP is registered in Nigeria, I can also enforce it in South Africa. The instances of regional agreement on IP rights in African Intellectual Property Organization and ARIPO, we've already talked about the IPO and the ARIPO. Now we have the AFCFTA has eliminated territorial limitation. It has also harmonized the requirement of IP rights and elimination of bureaucracy in the process of registering, so that I don't have to register my IP in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Togo. So I just eliminate the whole bureaucracy in the process of registering, and the requirements are harmonized. It has also promoted the African continent intellectual assets, such as traditional knowledge, music, geographical indications, among others. Now, the impact of IP on the African economy, which is the focus of today. According to Francis Gurry, the former Director General of WIPO, in the global knowledge economy, innovation, creativity, and IP holds far-reaching promise for spurring economic growth, trade, and employment in countries at all stages of development. Now, IP has major influence on MSMEs, which refers to micro, small, and medium enterprises. Across the African continent, SMEs account for about 90% of the total number of establishments. In South Africa, for example, they account for about 29% of employment and 52% of the GDP. In Nigeria, SMEs account for about 84% of employment and 49% of GDP. In Kenya, in a country like Kenya, they account for about 80% of the employment and 34% of GDP. By virtue of the impact of SMEs on society, they play a central role with it's a special role on the alleviation of poverty. So considering it continentally, the importance of IP laws safeguarding the rights of SMEs, their innovations, their brands, and designs are becoming more relevant now. Thank God for the invent of the AFCFTA. We hope that it will be well and effectively implemented. It will push us into a knowledge-based continental and eventually global economy. Formerly, only physical assets were considered the bulk of a person's value, but now with the recognition of IP rights, even continentally, IP turns intangible assets to money-making assets, so they become marketable. Therefore, the adequate protection of these IP rights within the continent will help deter potential infringements from persons outside or within the continent, and then generate income for the African business through the licensing, the sale, the commercialization of these protected products, and ultimately to raise the standard of living in Africa. So IP recognition is definitely a plus for Africa. I believe personally that we have the machinery in form of our agreements, the free trade agreements, the organizations and IP laws to provide exclusively the exclusivity of economic value that IP generates. And with the protection of IP rights, we can also attract foreign investments. So definitely, foreigners know that when they come into Africa, they can also protect their rights because definitely we want our own. So we have Chinese investors that always come in to just apply for patent, because they can see that, okay, if I do it here in Nigeria, because Nigeria is a signatory, then I can also protect it in another African state. So they do not have to engage in multiplicity of applications.
Please start rounding up.
In conclusion, IP is a power tool for economic development that is not yet being used to optimal effect in all countries, particularly in the developing world. It offers the possibility of growth and economic development in a way that is a zero-sum game, where if some win, others will lose. This was said by Camille Idris, the former Director General of WIPO. And according to me, everything is a product of IP, God's or man's. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Oyekachuku. I enjoyed your group's presentation from the write-up to the presentation. I enjoyed it. Well done. Okay, so let's hear from group 4. Who is presenting?
I am.
Okay, please continue. Thank you.
Just give me a minute.
Okay. Okay, I think you should just start while you're trying to figure out the
Thank you,
share.
please. Please, I think you should just help with the slide. The person that's supposed to help with the slide is on. I don't know. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Priscilla Flyemi from Group 4. I'm representing Group 4, and we're presenting on the importance and the impact of intellectual property on the African economy. Firstly, I'll start by saying that IP is a power tool for economic development, but this can only be done when IP is used to the optimal effect. Now, what is intellectual property? Plainly put, intellectual property is the protection of work done from the intellect, that is, creations, ideas, works that have been saved in a medium, anything basically, those to come, and then those that have been written out, those that have been saved, inventions, among other things. Please, next slide. Okay, so types of intellectual property. We have industrial property, we have copyrights and related rights, we have traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, we have plant variations, we have patents, trademarks, industrial design, trade secrets, geographical indications. When we talk about copyrights and related rights, copyrights basically talk about protection of artistic work, protection of written work, literary work, movies, cinematography, filmmaking, amongst other things. Related rights somehow related to IP, but in the sense, it covers stuff as transliteration, adaptation, and among other things. Traditional knowledge basically talks about homegrown knowledge, such as folklore, myths, and other kind of things. Patents covers inventions, novel things that have been added to an existing creation, among other things. Trademark protects the mark and distinctive values of a brand, a company, or an identity. Industrial designs are basically used to protect shape and size and designs that are actually made to be produced. Industrial designs can also be protected under copyright, but when they are produced to be used for commercial value, they are protected under industrial designs. Then we have trade secret. An example of a trade secret is Coca-Cola. The combination of the content of Coca-Cola is an example of trade secret. It could have been protected under patent, but trade secret doesn't have an expiry date. Trade secret is something that is not registered anywhere and all that, so it lasts like forever. Then geographical indications. When we talk about geographical indications, we are talking about inventions that came as a result of a particular location. For instance, in Nigeria now, when we talk about Ofada rice, we're speaking from Ofada in Nigeria, in a place in Ogun State. Another example is when we talk about Champagne, we're speaking of a place called Champagne. And in another regard, we have Guinea, etc. I hope you understand. Please, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so I'll be talking about the regulatory framework of IP in Africa. So Africa basically is regulated, IP in Africa is regulated basically by the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization and OAIPO. So OAIP is the regulatory body for French-speaking African countries, while ARIPO is the regulatory body for former British colonies in Africa. So ARIPO has the manner after the Madrid Protocol, in the sense that ARIPO mostly, like, you can actually get a single registration under ARIPO, but it is now dependent on the state if they've actually domesticated the law from ARIPO. So, for instance, what I'm trying to say is this: if I make an invention or I make something and then I register it under ARIPO, there are laws created by ARIPO. Yes. So these laws created by ARIPO, when they are signed by the signatory countries or states, in that sense, they are supposed to be domesticated. For example, Section 12 of the Constitution provides for domestication of foreign laws. So just like that, even under ARIPO, the African laws should be domesticated, because when they are not domesticated, even when you go to ARIPO, that's okay, you sign this thing, okay, all the countries under ARIPO are supposed to like align with it. That so you're supposed to be the first in line in that mode of registry. In a case whereby the country has not domesticated that particular law, it doesn't take effect. So ARIPO has four parts, and that's the RRA protocol on patents and industrial designs. There's the Swakopmund protocol on the protection of traditional knowledge. There's the Arusha protocol for plant variety, and then there's the Banjul protocol on trademark. Like I said earlier, that ARIPO takes like a form like the Madrid protocol. So I'll talk about the WIPO. So WIPO is like the national body, or should I say the worldwide body of intellectual property. ARIPO, in conjunction with United Nations, provides like the base mark, or they give the edge for which countries should not fall short of. So for instance, when a country makes a law or a regulation concerning IP in that particular state, they are supposed to be regulated, or they're supposed to follow the pattern that has been stated by United Nations in conjunction with WIPO. So WIPO is like the universal organization that is actually regulating IP everywhere, like in every country. And other nations, other countries, continents actually refer back to WIPO or to WIPO concerning their laws and other things. Please, next slide. Okay, so importance of intellectual property. This is the importance of intellectual property in Africa. So we can see the economic impact on SMEs. SMEs is small and medium enterprises. So this is for businesses, basically. So let me give an instance. In a case whereby a company or a company of 5 to 10 people come together, and then they have a brand name, they have processes that they follow, they have different things that they do in their operations and everything. And it comes to a point where another company that is larger, okay, sees that, okay, these people have a very good product, they have a very good name and all that. And instead of having to come through the company, the smaller company, and then get like the proper verifications and do maybe the proper amalgamations or other things like that, they just start producing their own products and all that. When there is intellectual property in place, that would not be possible, because their processes are protected, the product is protected, the name of the brand is protected, and everything. So before the intellectual property rights can be infringed upon, it will take the necessary process, which would in turn bring in revenue for the small and medium enterprise. And in Nigeria, just like the previous speaker said, small and medium enterprise, they actually had over 80% to the GDP of Nigeria, and also to the workforce in Nigeria. So I'll go to the next one. IP and innovation drive. IP actually drives innovation, because for a creative, I would use an instance of a creative. For a creative that has been making new things over time, IP is a very good incentive. IP incentivizes this creative to actually put in much work, because I'm sure that when I put in much work, I would not be ripped off of my work, but instead, every effort I put into my work would be duly compensated. Now, global corporations, IP encourages companies, foreign companies, and IP encourages foreign companies to invest in other companies, either through direct investments or indirect or through portfolio investments, either ways, because they believe that their investments, like the product on which they are investing, is actually adequately protected. So I've already spoken on the regulatory bodies and the regional blocks. So I'll go to IP and the African heritage. So when we're talking about Africa, what actually makes Africa Africa is the cultural heritage and all the traditional folklores, myths, and everything that culminates together to making Africa Africa. That is why the ARIPO that provided for the Facmondo Protocol on traditional knowledge is actually a plus. But Nigeria is not a signatory. Just like the other person stated that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, Area Agreement, is actually a plus and an improvement to Africa. I would say yes, definitely. But it is not, the agreement has not gotten to the final stage, because if you take a look at the protocol, the articles, and every other negotiations going on, there are still further plans for future negotiations, which will result in the protocol that would enhance intellectual property rights, leading to the protection of traditional knowledge, geographical indications, and other aspects of IP that affect Africa. So I'll go to the next slide, the impact of intellectual property. The impact of intellectual property. Awareness of market value through the educational sector, creativity and support for innovations, partnership of the public and private sectors, preservation of the narrative and integrity of IP in TK's creative folklores and work. So just like I've explained, coming forward, IP, because of the presence of IP, we can always say that, okay, a bigger company, a larger company wants to come in partnership with a smaller company, because they understand that their products are protected. They understand that everything that they are putting, every process is being patented, is being accounted for. So I'll go to the next slide. How do we drive sustainable socio-economic change in Africa through intellectual property? I've listed some areas on how we can drive economic change in Africa. So the first one I would say is IP education. IP education, just like most of us here, most of us had the first things of IP in the university. But I feel like even having the first things of IP from the university is quite late, because IP basically deals with everything around us. For some of us, we started doing things that bordered on creation and other things even before we entered the tertiary institution. And we know that we would have made much more economic value if we actually knew about intellectual property and how important it is to protect those things that we are creating. So the next one is IP information. IP information, just like I stated earlier, there has to be up-to-date information about intellectual property. You know, there are, just like I think someone mentioned it, that there are laws in Africa, in Nigeria, but the laws are weak and everything. So we need to have up-to-date information. I know that we do not necessarily have like so many structures in Nigeria in place to project IP. And I attended an event and the person was like, okay, you are your own IP police. Like you have to like push for your IP rights and other things. But I feel like IP information should be put in place. And this is what will lead me to the next one, IP infrastructures. We should have better IP infrastructures in terms of the judicial system, infrastructures in terms of the people, if it's an office, the IP consultants, the IP personnel basically that would, you know, help build the structure that is needed for better elucidation and better understanding of the term intellectual property. Then I would also talk about intellectual property management, just like a storekeeper takes records of different things. There should also be increased awareness of intellectual property management, and this would help to very much increase the value chain of a lot of businesses, brands, products, and in turn, definitely increase the economic development of Africa. Then last but not the least, I would like to talk about the automation of IP offices. So when there are IP offices and then the IP offices are automated, it would enhance the interest of people to wanting to get their IPs registered, to wanting to get their IPs, to wanting to get the necessary bodies notified that, oh, I made this creation and all that. It will reduce bureaucracy in intellectual property offices, among others. Then lastly, before I round up, I would love to talk about industrial property. IP should not be seen as a monopoly. It should not be seen as a monopoly. In much more developed countries, we can see that there is like a sharing, like there's the sharing of knowledge. So you can see that this country, this particular brand is giving this particular brand franchise, giving this particular brand license. Just like when you buy an HP laptop and then you're seeing a Lenovo battery inside an HP laptop, and then you buy an iPhone, and then I don't know if this happens, and you're seeing a Sony Ericsson battery inside it, or the process it was created maybe by iPhone and all that. So I feel like if we incorporate all this, the education, the awareness, the information, the management, the automation, the enforcement, and much more, making IP an industrial property and not just a monopoly, it will definitely lead to the development of the economy in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. I also enjoyed your presentation. First of all, I like the pictorial representations in your group's presentation. Secondly, you seem to know IP beyond just the writing. That's the presentation. So you're talking like out of the your overflow of knowledge, and like pastors would do. That's what you were doing. Last point, and you just continued. So it shows that you are enjoying the topic. Well done, Priscilla. And I hope that for others too, that you internalize these things so that even if there's an issue with your slide, you can always go ahead. So I'll just go on to read out the profiles of our mentors, and then we'll hear from them. Okay. So Mr. Max Nkobe is the founder/principal of Everlaw Associate. He works extensively in the fields of arbitration, ICT, and technology law and intellectual property. He's a facilitator on the annual information technology and the law course of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies since 2016. He has trained in advanced intellectual property law courses at the World Intellectual Property Organization Academy, and he's an accredited agent of the Nigerian Trademark and Patent Registry and has conducted IP registration businesses there since 2010. I'll also read out the profiles of others, of the two other mentors that we have here. Ayu Keta Oswald Tambe is an intellectual property freelance consultant and researcher, holder of a master's degree in intellectual property from African University, Maturity, Zimbabwe. At graduation, and in addition to his master's degree, he was awarded a certificate of excellence for best graduating student who demonstrated leadership potential in intellectual property with USD 500 cash prize donated by the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, ARIPO. He also studied an online course organized by WIPO on intellectual property management. At graduation, he was awarded a certificate in advanced course on IP management within the framework of a program made possible under the new collaboration among WIPO, the Korean Intellectual Property Office, KIPO, the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and Korea Invention Promotion Association. For WIPO alumni candidates, he has been enlisted as a potential beneficiary for the second time of the scholarship for a blended course on IP asset management from a practical business perspective. He's a graduate of the Rwanda Institute for Legal Practice and Development, holds a diploma in legal practice and development, and will be writing the bar exam this year. As a freelance researcher and consultant in IP rights issues, he liaises and interacts with international, regional, and national educational research and technology institutes, as well as young entrepreneur groups in his capacity as general manager of a civil society NGO known as Cameroon International Property Awards Association, to provide counseling and updates on intellectual property issues and trends, especially on the innovation and newly revised boundary agreement. And last, how to this is last but not the least. Okay. Amusa Sukurat Modupeola is a proficient consultant, analyst, and educator in the field of IP with public sector experience. She's a member of JIIPCC committee and a current scholarship student of the master's program in IP at African University in conjunction with JIIPCC. She has trained in advanced IP courses at JIIPCC and has facilitated various IP-related programs, both online and offline. Shukurat is the founder of an educational platform, The Intangible Nugget, on Instagram, and she's also an accredited agent at the Nigeria Intellectual Property Office. Her expertise, but not limited to trademark, patents, industrial design, copyright, and traditional knowledge. So we'll go ahead to hear from Mr. Marks to give his comments, then we'll hear from Shukurat, and then we'll hear from Mr. Tambi. After that, we will take the questions and answers. You're welcome, Mr. Marks.
Yeah, Juliana, good evening, and thank you. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, sir.
Apologies, I'm in not a very good place, so I can't put my camera on. And I'm sure for the mentees, having seen your lovely face, they won't want to see something that would spoil their weekend. So I'll keep my camera off.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so how many minutes do I have, Juliana? Just so that I make sure I don't...
About 7 to 10 minutes, sir.
7 to 10 minutes, okay, that's perfect. So thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, even though as it were online, that's what the new reality has brought us into. And I'm delighted to have had the privilege, as it were, to be the first mentor, I believe so, Juliana, to address this set of mentees. For me, I consider that a huge privilege. Yeah, yes, thank you, Juliana, for that unique privilege. And of course, I also, just greet my fellow mentors today. Of course, Shukurat and Mr. Tambo. Of course, I'm sure I'll get to also listen to them and enjoy their comments this evening. So since I have just 7 minutes, I'll just shoot straight to the point. I've listened to the presentation of the various groups, and I want to commend all the groups that have presented. It's quite a good step you are taking to begin to push yourself in your quest and your knowledge to understand IP. And I'm particularly delighted that the first session of your mentorship program is focusing on IP and Africa. I believe it's timely and important that we look at IP, within the African context, because so far as I'm concerned, what has happened is that African countries individually, we have lagged behind when it comes to IP. And unfortunately, because of the way things currently are, if each country in Africa is going to pursue its IP policy and IP plans alone, I doubt the chances that we'll be able to catch up with the other parts of the world. So it's wiser pursuing it as a continent. That would make a lot more sense for us. And with respect, if you look closely at the history of IP, you find out that to a large extent, IP is something that, groups of countries have come together to pursue at a regional or continental level for their benefit. I always give the example, if you go back to the very foundational international documents on IP, the Paris Convention and the Berne Convention. So far as I'm concerned, of course, as at the time those conventions were being negotiated, they had just barely finished the scramble for Africa. So Africa was even on the table when those conventions were negotiated. However, up until date, we are still, living in the shadow of those conventions, the Paris and the Berne Convention. A lot of what we have, trademark, copyright, patents, designs, still derive their lifeline from those conventions, negotiated at the time when we're not on the table, we're not technically even in existence as countries or as a continent. And yet we're supposed to play the same game, with people who already have had, what essentially has been almost a century of a head start before we ever got into the game. So it means if Africa would benefit from IP and really maximize IP, then Africa needs to come together and pursue this collectively. So most of our presentations have dovetailed and have looked at specifics, in terms of, so my presentation or my comments will just come from, a much higher level. So I would say one of the opportunities we have now as Africa is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which gives us an opportunity to fashion an IP system that would indeed help Africa to catch up, at least to an extent, with IP. Now, most of our presentations have carefully looked at what I call the primary IP types. That would be copyright, trademark, patents, and designs. Those are the primary because, for instance, if you are in Nigerian, you know that in Nigeria, we have laws governing each of those four. Of course, there are other aspects of IP. We don't exactly have laws, governing them, at least in Nigeria. So that would be things like geographic indications, which some of you have mentioned, passing off, which of course is common law, right? Trade secrets, which of course is not governed in Nigeria, at least by any fixed law. But however, a few of your presentations have touched on two of the parts that I want to focus on a little bit more: traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. Now, why I particularly want to zone in, on those two aspects of IP is that I believe that as Africans, some of the where our strength lies, and one of the presenters made that point, is in the rich culture and heritage of Africa. That is one of the strongest selling points for Africa. So if we could find a way to control the exploitation of those resources and ensure that Africans and Africa can get optimum benefit from the exploitation of those resources, then we would be on the way to having African economies that would indeed be robust. And I always give the example: if you go back, one IP law that if you look at, or IP sector, if you look at, is geographic indications. Now, France, as a country, has made so much from the protection of geographic indications. I heard a report once. I believe I heard a report once. I just can't pinpoint exactly where that report, the source of that report now. But essentially, what the report was saying was that France makes more money from selling champagne than Nigeria makes from crude oil. So let that sink in properly, that France makes more money from selling champagne than Nigeria makes from crude oil. So you can imagine that, we think oil is a hot thing in the world, but champagne, in fact, there's another report also that even says clearly, was saying, I think 40 million or so cups of coffee are drunk every day globally. So it tells you that some of these things we look at and just assume are not a big deal. Everybody thinks oil is the big deal and everybody wants to be in the oil sector. But imagine champagne, which essentially is, like one of the groups mentioned, a geographic indication, because there's a geographic area in France that produces the grapes used to make champagne. So the word champagne is not just a sparkly, bubbly drink. It's actually a particular drink produced under specific conditions in a specific region of France. So you can't use the word champagne to describe, something you come up. So for instance, an example of where I think was the iPhone created a model of iPhone and named it champagne color. And the guys in France, the association in French rose up and said, no, in France, rose up and said, no, you can't use the word champagne because it's a geographic indication. So essentially, geographic indication has given them a monopoly over a word that helps them market their goods very effectively and efficiently globally, and they are able to make a lot of money from it. So when it comes to geographic indications, a group mentioned Africa has a lot of opportunities in that area. But for me, our opportunities in that area should be followed up. But if we could look at traditional cultural expression and traditional knowledge, what we could get from that alone would far outstrip what other countries have gotten from geographic indications. So I'll give an example of one place where, to an extent, we have seen somewhat of traditional knowledge in use. There was a drug produced by the Nigerian Pharmaceutical Research Development Agency, NIPRID, called niprisan. The drug is used actually as a cure for, or maybe to manage, not a cure, but to manage sickle cell anemia, which of course we know is a disease endemic, as it were, to Africa. Now, that drug was produced because NIPRID came into an agreement with some traditional knowledge experts who were able to give them the formula known, historical through traditional knowledge that could help in managing sickle cell disease. So they signed what they call an ABS. That's a benefit sharing agreement to allow that happen. So that is just one simple example, even though that ultimately that didn't prove as successful as it should. But it just shows that if we get it right, a lot of things, I mean, you look at Lion King, for instance, that was African culture on display. How much did the Africans make out of it? Nothing to write home about. But compare with the movie Frozen, where they used some of the culture of a tribe in Norway, I believe, somewhere in Norway there, and we had, a lot of money was given to that, to the Norwegian people to use that expression of Norwegian folklore. So it means if we in Africa could really focus on traditional knowledge, on traditional cultural expressions, then it means we would be able to, get a lot of mileage. So at this point, I'll just end. I believe I've overshot my time already. So Juliana, thank you very much. And of course, when we get to the Q&A session, I'm sure we'll be able to engage further. So thank you, Juliana, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matt. It's always an honor to listen to you because you always make so much sense, and it's always a learning experience listening to you. Thank you, sir. So we'll move straight to Shukurat. No, we can't hear you.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
You know, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Jana, and good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Max Melga, good afternoon. I'm still learning from you, though.
Well done, ma.
And the other, and the third mentor as well. I didn't get his name. I think my network was fluctuating then. So just as Mr. Max has said, everyone has really done quite well. Everyone has presented very well. And it's just a starting step for everybody. So we really looked into the IP in Africa. Like just Mr. Max has said, we really need to look at the traditional aspect though, because if we notice, look at Ankara now, like everybody wants to wear Ankara. You can style it any way you like. There's Ankara jackets now. So everybody's really going to the African culture. So if all African countries can actually stay as one, going by the African Free Trade Agreements area also, we can always be in one position and we can actually overcome those other countries. Because if you look at it, it seems like the Paris Convention and the Berne Convention at all, they are not to our own benefits. If you look at it critically, they really don't benefit the African countries. So we need to come together as one and do something that will work for the African culture or the African race. Like about last month, a friend of mine traveled abroad. Then she came across a palm oil. The palm oil was written, I really can't remember what was in the palm oil, but it was, you can see something like mainly for use for Africans, because they know this is what Africa can take. And just first for them writing that mainly for use in Africa, they know people will buy it more. Those from Africa that are staying abroad will buy that product more because it's from Africa. So they're trying of using our own African culture to sell their products. Meanwhile, we are the ones that want to like take the advantage of that and look into that majorly. Then if you look at the geographical indication as well, we have different products. Some of the speakers mentioned it as well. We have different products. We have products like Dodo Kiri. It can pass for geographical indication. Look at Ofada rice as well. It can also pass for geographical indication. Even we have this, is the Enugu pepper, the yellow pepper as well. It can pass for geographical indication, but we are still like, we still need to enforce some of these laws because we don't have a direct law for the geographical indication, even though trademark law can still pass a bit for GI, but we don't have that GI law in place. And the same thing with traditional knowledge. We don't have traditional knowledge law in place. So we can actually look at creating a database that will actually capture all of these things. So if we have a database for traditional knowledge and somebody goes ahead and like bring it out there, we can say, okay, this is hers. Then going by a database, we can trace it and say, this is hers, like we register this thing, so yeah, so you guys can take it. There was a time Ebony Live was like calling out for application for people to come and speak about our law and so on and so forth. Things like that. If at the end of the day, people talk about that law and it goes out to the outside world or the foreign people, they can actually benefit from it because we don't have that database to capture all these things and save it and say, okay, this is her own. Right from time people say this ballet dance is from Nigeria, it's from the African culture. The Yoruba Ogun State dance that is actually from that particular place, but because we don't know the benefits, or should I say we don't really look into all of these things. We look more into foil and all, but they make more money looking at all these things that we don't look at all. So they come here, look at what we are doing, and they go over there to build on it. because we feel like, or should I say, we don't encourage what we have, or we don't know the beauty of what we have, is when we see it over there with them. We know that, oh, so this thing can actually be like this. So I think it's better we start improving on our African culture instead of looking at the oil and gas and every other thing that we can build on. We have so many products. African culture is really selling now. Look at, I think Kenya is really doing well when it comes to the African products. They are really doing well. Even their flower cut culture, they have a very good flower cut culture, flower vase process and all, where they generate so much money from it. They are really doing well. Even they have this biotechnology, they can implant it in their products. So there's a product, tomato. They can put this pepper spice. They infuse it in the tomato, so the tomato can have a kind of pepper spice. So they actually don't need pepper. So instead of buying pepper and tomato, you have a tomato that has this pepper spice in it already. So all these kind of things, we need to look into it also. So we don't just look at gas and oil. We need to infuse more into our intellectual property. And thank God, the creative space are kind of getting there. They are looking into it because of that now. So the creative space is more of intellectually capable. Like they're looking into it now, and they have more knowledge about it compared to before. But still, we still need to do this awareness has to go around to everybody. So we are all aware of intellectual property. Intellectual property is the new oil, but like people don't believe it, or they've not seen they've not seen what it can do, but it's actually going around. And when it comes fully in Nigeria, all of us should be involved in it and let it grow as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amusa. Thank you for your thoughts, which is very valid, actually. Thank you. So we'll move to Mr. Tambe.
Hello, Juliana.
Hello, sir.
Greetings to you, and greetings to Mark and Shukura as well. And I think it's a wonderful day for all of us today and all of Africa. I hope they are connected to follow up these programs like this one. It's a wonderful initiative, and I want to thank as well the mentees. They are not really mentees from my own point of view, because the way they spoke, all the speakers, it's just like what you said. They did a wonderful job, and I think some of us are learning certain things that are happening in some countries from their presentations, and I think that's very good. In fact, I will not take it to be like a class that we're going to give a lecture. I will take it like we're exchanging, and from their presentations, I would not like to go back to what the other mentors have said, because when you are speaking, the last in the group, almost all what you would have liked to say has been said, but I will say add something. What I'm going to add has to do with the idea of harmonizing IP laws in Africa. You know, we have two giant structures, OAP and ARIPO, that brings together over 2/3 of the African countries. And we have giant countries, we have big, very, very big, we have countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, and the rest with a very huge economies, which are not part of these structures, but they are running of the IP is commendable. When I follow presentations that have been made, and some of those that we carry out research, and we find out what these countries which are not in these two structures are doing in that domain. But you would agree with me that united we stand, divided we fall. And that's why for a long time, the project PIPO is a Pan-African initiative to bring together not just OAP and ARIPO, but all African countries on the platform. And that is why we are grateful with the initiative of our African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that is already having a protocol that looks into this aspect of harmonization. It's a wonderful idea. Secondly, I would like to mention and commend the last speaker of the mentees who talked about training, that in the university, they started talking about IP. I would concur with that idea, but at the same time, I would say that it is even better to start it from the primary schools, from the secondary schools at least. Look at what China has become. When you go to China, you see what they are doing. They look at what South Republic of Korea has become. All of them were on the same footing with the African countries, with Africa, but today they are giants. And what has made them giants? They don't have cocoa, they don't have coffee, intellectual property. And they start learning it from the early stages of education. If you go through African countries, very few African countries are engaging in teaching intellectual property in our educational institutions. And that's why efforts like those of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, and other international organizations are commendable because they are trying to bring the concept, the idea of intellectual property to the grassroots, to the common persons, so that we know equally how important it is and how it can help in our economy. In fact, the topics that you selected for this present exercise are very good because they are linking the impact and importance of IP to the economy, African economy. And I think it's a very good initiative. Now we want to talk about those type of IPs. I cannot go to give ideas, to give the various types of IP because they've been given by the young people, but I want to capitalize on one or two geographical indications. Shukura said something about geographical indications, which is true. Mark said the same thing, and I would say not something different. What I want to say is that IPs constitute the goal of the 21st century. That's what makes a nation. That's what makes an economy. We need to pay the attention, raise the profile of intellectual property in everything that we're doing. If a country, if a continent hasn't got an IP policy and an IP strategic plan, it's wasting its time. Because the goods, the tangible goods that we are producing every day, tomorrow, every other person will be producing. But what gives you an advantage over the other continent or over the other countries is IP. And I think the plan we have, the African Union plan, IP plan, is a plan which is very ambitious that Africans should take advantage of it and cause their own continent to become enviable by those from the other continents. Take, for instance, geographical indications. In Cameroon, we have two, the Oku white honey and the Penja pepper. We have many others in other African countries, like in Ethiopia with their coffee, and Zambia, Malawi, and Nigeria, and the rest. How do we use these geographical indications? They are signs on products which are God-given to us because of our climate and because of our know-how. We need to capitalize on them and make sure that we raise a profile of geographical indications in Africa. That one alone can give us all the money more than what oil, this oil that countries are fighting with each other because of oil. Geographical indications can give us all the money. And it will benefit the economy, the rural population, the common person. And this is what is important. It's not so much of patents. Patents and trademarks and copyrights are very good. Patents especially would come in. If we are industrialized, but you look at the level of industrialization of Africa, it is not as one would have wished it to come. Not that we should fold our hands, but what is easier for us to do now? Traditional knowledge, genetic resources that we have, geographical indications. And you know, as somebody said, these trade secrets are part of intellectual property assets. And they don't need anything registration because they are secrets you keep at their level. Look at Coca-Cola today. It has been able to sell and sell and sell and sell because of that formula, which has remained a secret for them. But it takes a lot of resources to protect such a secret. But they are very important. Our traditional knowledge, we just at times just expose them. And at times we clap, we sit quiet and we see how our resources are being exploited right and left. We don't know. That misappropriation is a means of taking away all of our resources. But if a country, if a continent hasn't got the idea of an intellectual property policy to start with, all the development plans that we have been carrying out, that we should carry out, might just be waste. We might not be tapping a lot from what we are supposed to tap from them. In fact, I was expecting the mentees to speak about, you know, IP is all over. The lenses I'm using, the dresses that Juliana is wearing on her, mark, and the rest. Those are all products of intellectual property. Look at even the AFCON matches going on in Cameroon today. I expected the young people to take examples from there, very good, realistic, and which are easy to be understood by those who are listening to us who are in Africa. The AFCON, you know that there is a whole project of protecting the IPs that are being used in the AFCON matches, but we don't know that. Look at even the transmission of the matches in Cameroon, for instance. It is not given to anybody. It is a product that is being protected and it is being sold out. Transmission rights are being sold out. Those are all components of intellectual property. And I want to say that I don't want to take a lot of your time. Probably during questions and answers, we'll be able to address all this. The initiative of ARIPO and WAPI are commendable. The other African countries should be able to, while accepting to maintain their independence, sovereignty, think of having a common platform like the African Free Trade Agreement is trying to encourage, where we can discuss issues generally and accept on certain principles for the benefit of Africa, for the benefit of our population, for the benefit of our economy. I know that we have a lot to gain from intellectual property, and I want to believe that the young people who just did some presentations, if we increase the number of these presentations and give it a wide approach to bring on board many other people, that would be a way of educating the population and creating the awareness that is blocking the implementation of the good laws that African countries have. It is not because I was not present when A and B was drafting a law that the law is bad. No. Go and sit on the table the next meeting, correct what you are supposed to correct there, and you will realize that these laws are good laws that we have. We can improve on them. Staying out of them, it is not the better solution. Get into it, make improvements that can be accepted, recommendations, and we apply them in our country. We have very good laws, like most African countries. We have very good laws for IP, but the problem is implementation. At the appropriate time, we'll be able to bring up suggestions and proposals with regards to enforcement and implementation of the IP laws that we have. Thank you so much, Juliana, while waiting for the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tambe. Like the enthusiasm with which you're talking, and you're just bringing out like different examples that were not even put in the presentation. And that's the reason why we bring mentors here to point our direction in places that we're not looking at. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all the mentors. So we're going to go straight to the Q&A. We've already asked everyone to submit their questions. So I will read out the questions there in the chat box, and then we'll listen to our mentors from Mr. Marks to Shukurat and then to Mr. Tambe finally. So the first question is, what policies can be implemented to ensure the protection of TK and GI? That's traditional knowledge and geographical indication. The second question is, measures creatives can take to ensure proper protection of trade secrets, as there is no legislation that has been enacted primarily for that purpose. And the third question is the role of IP in the development of the agricultural sector in Africa. So the questions are in the chat box. Would listen to the answers from Mr. Marks first. That's the answers to these three questions. Then we move to Shukurat and then to Mr. Tambe. Over to you, Mr. Marks. Okay, I guess Mr. Marks is not here. So let's move to Shukurat.
Okay, so I'll answer the first question that says, let me see. Okay, what policy can be implemented to ensure the protection of TK and GI? As we know, we have intellectual property laws, but most of these, or let's say all of these laws, they don't actually protect trademark. They don't actually protect TK holistically. Because if you look at patents and the like, to some extent, it might protect it, but they don't protect it fully. Same thing with copyright and trademark and the like. So the best thing we can do is like documentation. We have to like document it. Although most TK and TCs, or most TK and TCs, you have to like document them before you can protect it under copyright. But most of these TK, like your what should you say, herbalist, incantation, and so on, they are sacred. So most of these things, they don't have them in a tangible form. So to have a better database, that will be the best thing. When you have a database, that way your intellectual property cannot go into the public domain. Or because of its free use, because is actually everywhere, people won't be able to like use it freely because we have documented it and it's in the database. So we need to like create a documentation process and also have it in a database. That way we know it's ours and it's protected somewhere. Then the same thing with GI as well. Although we don't have a GI law presently, though some people are working on it, we should have it out soon. So what we have now is trademark. Yeah, trademark protect GI to some extent. That's under your certification mark and collective mark. So to some extent, certification mark and collective mark protect GI for now. So I think I'll go ahead to answer the other question. Measures creative can take to ensure proper protection of trade secrets, as there is no legislation that has primarily enacted for that purpose. Yes, there's no legislation for trade secrets. So the best bet is to do the same thing Coca-Cola is doing. You'll have to keep your secrets, secrets. That's just it. As long as it's secret, nobody have access to it. And make sure you sign a confidentiality agreement. That's your NDA. That is very, very important. I always have this example I give of Vijumic and Bobo. Bobo used to be a staff of Vijumic. So when Bobo left Vijumic, Bobo went ahead to start producing Bobo. Meanwhile, because there was no confidential agreement between Vijumic and Bobo, Vijumic could not hold Bobo responsible or hold him down for taking his trade secrets. So your NDA is very, very important. In as much as you know your business is going to move forward and you want to share it with people, always make sure there is an NDA signed. And you have to tell them, you have to say the condition of your NDA. Maybe it's after 2 years or so, you left my company, you cannot do so, or you can't work with the same company that is producing this same product or something like that. Just make sure you are keeping your trademark or your trade secrets safe. So you can do that, confidentiality agreement and keep it safe. That's just the best thing. I think some people also talk about non-compete. Somehow you can also implement that. Then the role of IP in development of the agricultural sector of African economy. I think sometimes was it early this year? Early this year, the new plant variety law was signed. So that would be a very good one. So when you have that new plant variety, like it protects plants, just like the way we have patents protect invention and the likes, the new plant variety protects plants. So as questions do with agriculture, you have this protection for your plants. If you are doing budding, layering, and the likes, you have that protection for your plants. As long as the plant from those products is uniform, is stable. You have to look at the stability, the uniformity, and the like. So that way you can protect your plant under the new plant variety for plant breeders and every other farmers that have this. So you can't use your tents to protect variety, you have to use the new plant variety. So before, Nigeria does not have it in place. So that would be a good one for biotechnologies, the likes, and the farmers and the breeders to use the new plant variety to protect the plants that are staying. Oh, okay. My network.
Thank you very much, Shukura. Are you done?
I don't know where I stopped. I think my network.
That's the plant variety. You were talking about the plant variety.
Okay, yes, I'll start with the plant variety. The new plant variety law has been enacted in Nigeria. So the breeders and the farmers can take the advantage of doing that, because most times what you have to do with your plant is like, if you have a plant that you want this plant to have the taste of maybe orange and the taste of strawberry, you can do this like grafting, layering, and budding. So once the plant is stable and is uniform, you can actually protect it under your new plant variety. So that way the farmers also have a higher hand to actually gain something from whatever it is they're planting or they're producing, the seed as well. So that would be that for the agricultural sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shukurat, for your response to the question. Let's move over to Mr. Max. So the questions are in the chat box, 3 of them. You can go ahead to answer.
Okay, apologies, Juliana. You need to read them out for me. My network timed out. So
Okay.
When I log back in, the questions in the chat are no longer there.
Okay, so I'm still going to post them again now, but I can still go ahead to read it. What policies can be implemented to ensure the protection of traditional knowledge and geographical indication? Measures creatives can take to ensure proper protection of trade secrets, as there is no legislation that has been enacted primarily for that. And then the third question is the role of IP in the development of the agricultural sector of the African economy.
Okay, thank you. I can see them now. So I'll just touch on a few of them. I see that Shukrat already done a good job answering most of them. So I'll just throw a few more perspectives in on them. So policies to ensure protection of traditional knowledge and geographic indications. Well, essentially, African countries need to pass laws. But for me, I prefer, like I've mentioned earlier, if African countries choose to come together and create continent-wide laws like a treaty that all African countries can ratify. So, for instance, I believe one of the groups mentioned the Swakopmund Protocol on of the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. That's ARIPO. So ARIPO already has essentially an intra-African agreement that other African countries could sign up to that protects traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression. So I believe that kind of approach makes more sense than for individuals to go it alone on their own, and that collective there needs to be some level of properly protects the different countries and takes care of their peculiarities. So essentially, bottom line for question one is that we just need to pass a law that protects traditional knowledge, and of course, same thing for geographic indications. I believe Shukrat had also mentioned that in Nigeria, you could protect GIs, that's geographic indications, to an extent under the Trademark Act, using the avenue of collective marks, which is not usually very effective, but is still has some measure of effectiveness. So I'll jump to question two. So for creatives to protect their trade secrets. Well, I'm wondering, because when it comes to creatives, if we are talking of entertainment industry creatives, I don't know how relevant trade secrets might be to them. And I say that from the viewpoint of the fact that some of the industries where trade secrets are most used and efficient would be the more technical or technological industry. So things like, I'm sure somebody had mentioned Coca-Cola, for instance. If you talk of maybe in the pharmaceutical industry to an extent, and all that. But for creatives, yeah, there might be some measure of their work that they could protect using trade secrets, but that would be not the very direct part of their work. Maybe other collateral things. For instance, their list of distributors, list of customers, and all. And I say that because in the creative sector, say for instance in the music, movie industry, and all of that, you essentially create products you want to put in the market instantly. So I really don't know what part of their creative products they need to keep secret, because when it comes to trade secrets, like I've said, there are many different aspects to it. Of course, there are other non-technical information that are also part of trade secrets, so things like your customer list. So given the writing on the back of the example Shukura gave of a bobo drink and viju drink, two popular drink, that milk or dairy based drinks that we know children like a lot. So when it comes to something of that nature now, where trade secret would have come in is that apart from the technical formula used to make the milk drink and flavor it, another thing that would have been valuable to the visual producer to protect and ensure that the guy, his former employee, would not have succeeded in, coming into his market, is things like his list of suppliers. So the people he buys his milk from, the people he buys the coloring and the flavoring from. So if you're able to protect that, it means that even if your competitor comes into the same market space with you, they're not able to get those inputs to produce the product at the cheap price or at the good quality you get. So that way you're able to maintain of sustaining your competitive advantage. So that trade secrets that creatives will have some aspect of that business that trade secrets will come into, but I don't see it playing too much of a critical role. Copyright and trademarks usually are the prime IP products you find in the creative sector because of the nature of the products that that sector produces. Then the last question, the role of IP in development of agricultural sector of African economy. So yeah, so Shukrat has mentioned, and I just agree with her, that plant variety is one important area. That's another IP we didn't discuss as much, but plant varieties, like she has explained, is essentially protecting the effort people take into producing better, of danger I find with plant variety protection for African economies is to be careful, because already we have a lot of outcry in Kenya, particularly where foreigners have come into the country, improved local food crops and seeds, allowing farmers local access to those seeds without having to pay quite a high cost for it. So in protecting plant variety, a country has to be very careful who he allows to come and monopolize those plant varieties, because there are certain plant varieties that local farmers have improved by themselves over time, but because they don't have the knowledge and the education, they might not come forward to protect those improved plant varieties. And if you allow foreigners come into Africa, protect those plant varieties, and now stop our local farmers from using them, then that becomes a problem. So I would only recommend that if a plant variety based protection is being sought, then there has to be exemption for local farmers just to ensure that there's secure our food security and foreigners don't come and then edge us out of the market. So it says Priscilla says that when it comes to creatives, what protects a creative's work primarily for most creatives, musicians, movie makers and all, is copyright. Because when you express your creativity in designing, composing a song, or in putting together a movie, the part of intellectual property that protects you is actually copyright, because that's an expression of your creativity, of your individual flair in bringing forward a work. Because copyright, we usually refer to them as music would enjoy. So typically copyright. Then of course, because creatives have to market their product, the symbols they used to market that product, it could be the name of the artist, it could be the logo of the record label, it could be the name of the record label. Those unique symbols that are used to market the intellectual property of the creatives usually will be covered by trademark. So, like I said, yeah, trade secrets may have a place there, but not very prominent, at least in the creative sector as in other sectors. Yeah, thank you, Juliana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marks. Thank you so much for the answers. So we'll just move straight to Mr. Tamde. You can go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you, Juliana. I think, as I said, when you are coming in the third after some very, very eminent speakers have taken the floor, you virtually have nothing to do. In fact, I concur with all their proposals of solutions to problems like this, with the three questions. But I would just add that with regards to policies to protect traditional knowledge and geographical indications, for traditional knowledge especially, we have within our countries and regions the Convention on Biological Diversity, as well as the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol is a protocol that provides the information that is needed. It provides the ability for a fair, according to Article 1 of that protocol, providing fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources and traditional knowledge. It is a complement to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which, if countries probably adhere to these conventions and they implement the content, it will be a long way towards success in adopting policies to protect our traditional knowledge. And I would like to state here that WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, has an interministerial committee that has been looking into how to enhance the protection of traditional knowledge in our various communities, as well as our geographical indications. With regards to geographical indications, we need to equally not just have other IP rights putting the products, but have our country's individual laws that address IP, that address geographical indications, as well as if there is regional law that controls geographical indications. What is generally proposed by most scholars is the need to have a sui generis type of protection that has a body of rules that govern only geographical indications exclusively. Because if you take, for instance, a trademark, and you want trademark that is a collective mark to protect geographical indications, at one point or the other, you see the limitations, and you realize that trademarks have a time which they have a 10 years for some countries, but geographical indications for the community, they will live as long as the community lives and the climate is good and they still have those products. That's what I wanted to add with regards to the first question. With regards to the second question, creatives protecting trademark, trade secrets. In addition to what has been said, I would like to propose that trade secrets come in and they become important when they have commercial value. If you have a formula that you know that helps you to give you leverage over other products, you try to protect it. And protecting it means protecting the formula. How do you do it in the bakeries? The common bakeries we have for bread, for beignet, puff that we eat, there are certain formulas that are used by these bakeries. How do you protect them? For instance, in an office, you are supposed to make sure that all information that comes in and goes out is carefully protected, and you assign particular people to access certain information that has to do with that formula. You don't let any type of person come in. And for instance, people come in to use your machines to telephone or to make photocopying. Those are aspects that you have to control to know at the end of the day which document has been photocopied and taken out, because it is through those things that your trade secrets can be exposed to the public. So you have to adopt certain measures. That, unfortunately, you cannot go to the IP office to register protection for the trade secrets. It's easy to be secret. So you have to use your own initiative. Copy from success cases. We have just been talking about Coca-Cola, and there are many others. Copy from them and try to put in a structure. Everything that needs IP succeeds in most places because of the policy that has been put in place. If you have an enterprise, you have a trade secret policy that makes you to make sure to keep such a formula confidential. There must be confidential agreement that you sign to make sure that anybody who comes here and has access to that information will not be able to use that information elsewhere. That is just to add to what the others have given. With regards to the role of IP in development of agriculture, I think the plant varieties constitute one of the ways we can protect the plants, and by so doing encourage workers in the agricultural department to continue investing in research and development. The Bangui Agreement that governs OIP countries in Africa reserves a very, very important place for plant varieties. And it gives you information on how you can use the measures outlined there to protect plant varieties. And by so doing, a lot is being done to protect the agricultural sector. When we talk of research, you would agree with me, a lot of our African countries, we don't very much care about research. If funding is coming from elsewhere, we are interested in research, but researchers are abandoned to themselves. Those are the people who have the keys to everything that can give us ways of protecting, of growing our agriculture and protecting it. A lot of their research results are inside cupboards because there is no funding. If you go into the budgets of most African countries, the budgets for research are very, very insignificant. So there is need to be for that political will, and there's need for enough funding to encourage the agricultural sector and the researchers. And when we talk of agricultural sector, it's not just the cocoa and coffee. Agropastoral, it includes even the animal varieties, the food, the animal feed, all of that. We need to do much through research to come out with measures and products that can help us increase the production of our agricultural produce to be able to sell more and guarantee increased revenue for the population. The other aspect that I can talk about with regards to agriculture is training. We cannot do without training. Most schools of agriculture are there to help us, but they too have the problem of funding. So to say the least, we have to adopt ambitious programs that encourage research and development in the agricultural sector, as well as implement policies that are being encouraged through the various international and regional agreements that we have. I've just cited the case of Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tambi. So we've come to the end of the session for today. I think it was very insightful and profitable because I also learned a lot, and I'm sure that we have been able to talk to each other and enrich our knowledge. So based on that, I would like to say thank you to everyone, the mentors, the mentees. Thank you for making today worth it. For those that their videos are still on, I can see Paul, Oye, Kachuku, Chiso, Raji, Faith, everyone that put their videos on. Thank you for allowing us to see your lovely faces. Nifemi, thank you so much. Have an amazing weekend, everyone. And don't forget to put what you learned online on LinkedIn or Instagram, and then tag your mentors so that they know that they were able to reach you today. And don't forget that there is a 30 minutes private mentorship session that is available. So Mr. Max is already there. So someone has already taken advantage of that actually. So you can have 30 minutes with your favorite mentors. Thank you so much. I love you all. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye, Juliana. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Shukura.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye.
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 Bye.